Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank all of our witnesses for their service. Thank you for being here. I know, for me, I'm not here to particularly defend any sort of corporate strategy or investment. I think most of the Democrats and the Democrats on this committee are really focused on supporting people, and we're not here to put working people above big corporations. And companies, we do know, also want to consider certain goals that they have when they're investing, whether it's because climate is obviously changing and it's having an impact. Companies obviously prioritize diversity because America is actually more diverse, and it helps them do business in a diverse society. So these are decisions that make financial sense, and I think corporations are making these all the time. I think what we should also be is honest about what we're actually doing here. I think the majority is clearly trying to score political points with some sort of panic around whatever wokeism is. I'm not even sure what wokeism still is or how to actually describe it. And we have many business leaders in the community that are criticizing this Republican far-right agenda that's ignoring climate change and that really is not operating in any sort of reality, but in some sort of Fox News bubble and ecosystem. So the far-right wants a revenge, and they want a revenge on corporations, on working people, on everybody. The interest campaign that's happening across this country, and certainly here in this committee, is also heavily orchestrated and wide-reaching. ESG efforts have a lot of ties to dark money also across this country. I want to just give an example. I want to ask unanimous consent to submit a February 2023 article from the group Documented, which describes a private anti-ESG dinner on June 1st of last year during an annual Heritage Foundation meeting. So if I can please have that article submitted for the record. Attendees of this dinner included representatives of Consumers Research, which is an anti-union and anti-quote-unquote woke organization. Now, Mr. Frerichs.
Without objection to order.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Frerichs, a dinner like this, what does this tell you about coordination behind these kind of anti-ESG attacks?
I think that it's not a surprise. We see it when letters are signed that there's someone behind it.
Thank you. And at the heart of these anti-ESG campaigns is also a name that should be very familiar to the American public, and that's longtime conservative activist Leonard Leo. We all know that Leonard Leo has spent his career installing conservative justices to the Supreme Court in an effort to overturn Roe v. Wade and so much other progress across this country. You also may remember Mr. Leo from recent press reports that have said that he asked Kellyanne Conway and her polling firm to give Ginny Thomas, quote, another $25,000. He emphasized that the paperwork should have no mention of Ginny, of course. Now, we know that Mr. Leo has set his sights on our democracy, on our court. He's amassed $1.6 billion to do it. And so this is incredibly problematic for us as a country. And this is actually what this committee should be looking at. I also want to note an October 2022 article by the New York Times. And in it notes that Mr. Leo's network in his campaign to push some of the country's biggest corporations on making investments, pushing environmental, social, governance causes, all links back to this kind of anti-ESG movement that's happening that we're discussing today. So again, Mr. Frerichs, as your perspective as Illinois State Treasurer, how do orchestrated campaigns, clearly as this one, also that have folks like Mr. Leo involved, how does it actually hinder the free market that our Republican colleagues seem to always uplift and care so much about?
When they pass legislation that prohibits disclosure of information, that hinders our ability to make good decisions. When they pass legislation that punishes certain companies from making business decisions, it costs taxpayers in their states, and it's not insignificant dollars. We've documented billions and billions of dollars this legislation is going to cost American taxpayers.
Thank you for that. Now, you signed a letter along with 13 other state treasurers opposing anti-ESG legislation and noted that these radical bans have very real consequences for taxpayers. You've discussed a lot of this today at this hearing, and I appreciate that. The letter warned that if these anti-ESG bans succeed, and I quote, there will be two kinds of states moving forward. States focus on short-term gains and states focus on long-term beneficial outcomes for all stakeholders. And you've alluded to this earlier today. Can you explain one more time, because I think this is a really critical piece of what you focused on today. What exactly do you mean by this by this quote in particular?
So when we're investing college savings funds or retirement savings, I'm not so much interested in the next quarter profitability for a company, but their ability to be profitable for the next quarter of a century. That's because as a fiduciary, I'm looking out for those beneficiaries' long-term interests. We are not day traders. We don't hop in and out of these companies. We're universal investors. And rather than trying to boycott certain companies, we try to work with them.
Thank you, sir. And just, I hope that the next committee meeting we can actually investigate Mr. Leo and his anti-ESG campaigns and support that's happening and causing destruction across this country. And with that, I yield back.